Millionaire enjoyed his stay at the resort until he saw his ex-wife with triplets. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Ethan. Reynolds stood at the vast window of the Coastal Pines Resort's executive lounge, his silhouette stark against the setting sun. The crystal tumbler in his hand caught the dying light, amber liquid swirling as he contemplated his next business, acquisition. Everything in his life had always been meticulously calculated, each move precisely orchestrated to build his empire. At 42, he was at the pinnacle of success, having transformed a modest inheritance into a global business empire worth billions. The resort, an exclusive enclave on the California coast, wasn't his usual scene. He preferred the sterile efficiency of his penthouse office in New York. But sometimes appearances mattered. The upcoming merger required a certain finesse. His potential business partners were old money, and they appreciated these displays of leisure, even if Ethan saw them as nothing more than strategic positioning. His phone buzzed. Another message from his board of directors about the Wang Technologies deal. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. They were nervous about his aggressive takeover strategy, but they didn't understand his vision. They never did. In his world, hesitation meant loss, and Ethan Reynolds never lost. The bartender approached with practiced deference, offering to refresh his drink. Ethan declined with a subtle gesture. He needed his mind sharp for tomorrow's preliminary discussions. Every detail had been arranged. The casual running into his potential partners at breakfast, the seemingly impromptu golf game, the carefully orchestrated conversation about market trends that would lead naturally to his proposal. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A burst of laughter from the lobby caught his attention. Children's laughter, an unusual sound in this adults-oriented establishment. Ethan turned, irritated at the disruption of his thoughts, and felt the world tilt on its axis. There, crossing the marble expanse of the lobby, was Olivia Mitchell, the woman who had walked away from him 3 years ago, leaving nothing but a brief note and a void he'd filled with more work, more deals, more success. She looked exactly as he remembered, perhaps even more beautiful, with her dark hair catching the lobby's soft lighting, her elegant sundress moving with each step. But she wasn't alone. 3 small boys, no more than 3 years old, danced around her legs, identical triplets with dark hair and features that struck him with shocking familiarity. One of them looked up, frowning slightly in concentration as he tried to catch his mother's attention, and Ethan felt his heart stop. He knew that frown. He'd seen it countless times in childhood photographs of himself. The crystal tumbler slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound drew Olivia's attention, and their eyes met across the lobby. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by something else. Fear. Guilt. She quickly gathered the boys closer, hurrying them toward the elevator. "Sir, allow me to clean that up," the bartender said, rushing forward with a cloth. Ethan barely heard him. His mind was racing, calculating dates, remembering their last night together, the way Olivia had seemed different in the weeks before she left. Everything he thought he knew about his life was rearranging itself like pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving. One of the boys broke free from Olivia's grasp, running back toward the lobby with the boundless energy of childhood. He stopped short when he saw Ethan, tilting his head in a gesture so familiar it was like looking in a mirror. Their eyes met, the same shade of grey-green that Ethan saw every morning in his own reflection. "Michael!" Olivia called, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Come here, sweetheart." The boy, Michael, gave Ethan one last curious look before running back to his mother. The elevator doors closed, taking them away, but the impact of their presence remained like an aftershock. Ethan stood frozen, his carefully ordered world crumbling around him. The mathematics of the situation was impossible to ignore. 3 years since Olivia left, 3 boys who looked exactly like his childhood photos, 3 pairs of eyes that matched his own. He pulled out his phone, canceling tomorrow's meetings. With a few swift texts, for the first time in his life, business would have to wait. He had more pressing calculations to make, questions that couldn't be answered with spreadsheets or market analyses. Why hadn't she told him? What else didn't he know? And most importantly, what was he going to do about it? The sun had fully set now, leaving the lobby in artificial brightness. Ethan walked to the elevator, his steps deliberate, his mind already formulating strategies. But this wasn't a hostile takeover or a merger negotiation. This was something far more complex, far more personal than anything he'd ever faced. For once in his life, Ethan Reynolds didn't have a plan, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't leaving this resort until he had answers. Sleep eluded Ethan that night. He paced his luxury suite, tie loosened, jacket discarded, as memories he'd carefully locked away came flooding back. Olivia had been different from anyone else he'd ever met. She wasn't impressed by his wealth or intimidated by his power. As the head curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, she had her own passion, her own world that had nothing to do with profit margins and market shares. Their relationship had been intense, unexpected, and completely outside his carefully constructed life plan. For 18 months she had brought color into his monochrome existence, but then, like everything that didn't fit into his rigid worldview, he had begun to push her away. More late nights at the office, more business trips, more cancelled dates. He had told himself it was necessary that she would understand. She hadn't. The morning sun found him standing on his private balcony, watching the ocean crash against the shore. His phone had been buzzing incessantly. Board members, lawyers, his executive assistant all demanding his attention for the Wang Technologies deal. He ignored them all, his mind replaying every detail of the previous evening. The boys' faces, their movements, the way one of them, Michael, had looked at him with such innocent curiosity. How could he have not known? How could Olivia have kept this from him? The questions burned in his mind, demanding answers. A knock at his door startled him from his thoughts. Opening it, he found himself face to face with Robert Chen, his head of legal affairs, who had flown in for the merger discussions. "Ethan, what's going on? The Wangs are waiting in the breakfast room. This deal—" "Cancel it," Ethan cut him off, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Cancel? Are you insane? We've been working on this for months. The board will—" "The board works for me, Robert, not the other way around. Cancel everything. Something more important has come up." Robert stared at him, mouth agape. In 15 years of working together, he had never seen Ethan Reynolds abandon a deal. More important than Wang Technologies. What could possibly— "My sons." The words felt strange on his tongue, foreign yet undeniably right. Robert's expression shifted from confusion to shock as Ethan briefly explained the situation. "I need you to find out everything you can about Olivia's life for the past 3 years. Where she's been living, what she's been doing, everything." "Ethan," Robert said carefully, "are you sure that's the best approach? Maybe you should try talking to her first." Ethan turned to look out the window again, his jaw set. "She had 3 years to talk to me, Robert. 3 years of watching my sons grow up without me knowing they existed. I think we're past the point of casual conversation." But even as he said the words, he knew Robert was right. This wasn't a hostile takeover where he could simply leverage his power and resources to get what he wanted. These were children. His children, and their mother was the woman who had once known him better than anyone else in the world. He dismissed Robert with a wave, his mind already formulating a new strategy. He needed to understand why Olivia had kept this secret, why she had denied him the knowledge of his own children. But more than that, he needed to understand what role he could play in their lives now. The sound of children's laughter drifted up from the pool area below. Ethan moved to the balcony, looking down to see the 3 boys playing in the shallow end, their mother watching carefully from a nearby lounge chair. An unfamiliar emotion gripped his chest as he watched them, joy mixed with an aching sense of loss for all the moments he had missed. One of the boys was showing off his swimming skills, while another built elaborate patterns with pool toys. The third, Michael, he was certain, sat on the pool's edge, studying everything around him with serious concentration. Each of them displayed distinct personalities, yet they moved in unconscious harmony with each other, a unit complete. Unto themselves. A man approached Olivia's chair and Ethan's hands gripped the balcony railing. The stranger was tall, athletic, probably in his mid-30s. He carried 2 glasses of what looked like fruit juice, handing one to Olivia with easy familiarity. The boys called out to him enthusiastically, and he responded with practiced affection. Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years: jealousy. This stranger knew his sons had perhaps been there for their first steps, their first words. He had what Ethan didn't even know he wanted until yesterday: a place in their lives. Straightening his tie, Ethan made a decision. He would go down to the pool, approach Olivia, and demand answers. But as he reached for his suit jacket, he caught his reflection in the mirror and paused. The stern businessman staring back at him wasn't who he needed to be right now. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Reynolds was facing a situation that couldn't be resolved with money, power, or carefully worded contracts. He needed a different approach, something that went against every instinct he'd developed. Over his years in business, he needed to be patient, to observe and understand before acting. These boys didn't need a CEO or a business tycoon. They needed a father. The question was, could Ethan Reynolds become the kind of father they deserved? The EE Resort's breakfast room buzzed with quiet conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. Ethan sat at a corner table, his usual morning coffee untouched, as he watched Olivia and her companion with the boys at a table near the windows. The stranger was helping one of the triplets cut his pancakes while chatting animatedly with another. The third boy, Michael, the one who had looked at Ethan with such striking familiarity, kept stealing glances in his direction. The man with Olivia was Jason Foster, as Ethan had learned through a discreet inquiry with the concierge. A pediatrician from San Francisco, he had been part of Olivia's life for the past year. The information sat like lead in Ethan's stomach. While he had been building his empire, someone else had been building relationships with his sons. A burst of laughter drew his attention back to their table. One of the boys had managed to get syrup in his hair, and Olivia was trying to clean it up while attempting to keep the other 2 from adding to the mess. The scene was chaos. Beautiful, domestic chaos that made something in Ethan's chest ache. This was what he had missed. Breakfast battles, sticky fingers, and the sound of children's laughter. "More coffee, sir?" A waiter appeared at his elbow. Ethan waved him away, his eyes still fixed on the family scene before him. Family. The word felt foreign in his mind. He had spent so many years convinced that emotional attachments were liabilities, that the only relationships worth maintaining were those that advanced his business interests. Now, watching Olivia and Jason navigate the controlled chaos of breakfast with 3 toddlers, he realized how empty his philosophy had been. He was so absorbed in his observations that he didn't notice Olivia approaching until she was standing at his table. Her presence caught him off guard, a sensation he wasn't used to. "We need to talk," she said quietly, her voice carrying the same soft strength he remembered. "But not here and not in front of the boys." Ethan nodded, careful to keep his expression neutral. "Name the time and place." "The beach, after their afternoon nap. Jason will stay with them." She hesitated, then added, "They're usually down by 2. "I'll be there," he replied, fighting the urge to demand answers immediately. The businessman in him wanted to take control of the situation, to dictate terms and timelines. But he was learning slowly that this situation required a different approach. Olivia turned to leave, then paused. "Ethan, I know you probably hate me right now, and you have every right to. But please understand, everything I did thinking about what was best for them." Before he could respond, she was gone, weaving her way back through the tables to where Jason and the boys were finishing their breakfast. Ethan watched as they gathered their things, the well-practiced routine of a family unit evident in their movements. Jason lifted 2 of the boys while Olivia took the third, and they made their way out of the restaurant. As they passed his table, Michael twisted in Jason's arms to look at Ethan again. This time the boy raised his small hand in an uncertain wave. Without thinking, Ethan waved back, earning a brilliant smile that transformed the child's serious face. The gesture didn't go unnoticed by Jason, who glanced between Michael and Ethan with a thoughtful expression. There was no hostility in his look, just a quiet assessment that made Ethan wonder what Olivia had told him about their past. Left alone at his table, Ethan pulled out his phone and began to research. Not business, reports or market analyses, but articles about child development, parenting triplets, and building relationships with toddlers. He had always believed that knowledge was power, but for the first time in his life he was seeking knowledge not to gain an advantage, but to understand how to be part of something bigger than himself. The morning stretched ahead of him, hours, to fill before his meeting with Olivia. He considered going to the gym, his usual routine when staying at hotels, but instead found himself walking to the resort's gift shop. The stuffed animals and children's books caught his eye, things he had never noticed before. After careful consideration, he selected 3 identical plush sea otters, each with a slightly different colored bow tie. He also chose a book about ocean animals, remembering how intently the boys had watched the waves from the breakfast room window. The cashier smiled as she wrapped his purchases. "Your grandchildren will love these." Ethan didn't correct her assumption. He was still getting used to the idea himself, that he was a father, that somewhere in this resort were 3 little boys who shared his blood, his features, and possibly parts of his personality that he had yet to discover. As he walked back to his suite, gifts in hand, he realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business deals or market strategies. His mind was filled with questions about favorite colors, preferred bedtime stories, and whether any of his sons shared his childhood love of building blocks. The path ahead was unclear, something that would have terrified him in his business life. But as he placed the wrapped gifts on his suite's coffee table, he felt something else: anticipation. In a few hours, he would talk to Olivia and maybe begin to understand the choices that had led them all to this moment. The afternoon, sun cast long shadows across the beach as Ethan made his way down the wooden steps from the resort. He had changed from his usual business attire into casual clothes, khakis and a light blue button-down shirt rolled up at the sleeves. It felt strange, like wearing someone else's skin, but he understood instinctively that his power suits had no place in this conversation. Olivia was already there, sitting on a large beach blanket, her dark hair lifting slightly in the ocean breeze. She looked lost in thought, watching the waves crash against the shore with the same contemplative expression she used to wear when studying a new piece of art for her museum. "You're early," she said as he approached, not turning to look at him. "So are you." Ethan settled onto the blanket, maintaining a careful distance between them. "The boys are with Jason." She nodded. "They're watching their favorite movie. It buys us about 90 minutes before they start getting restless." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of waves and distant seabirds. There were so many questions Ethan wanted to ask, so many accusations he could make, but he waited. In negotiations, he had learned that sometimes silence was the most powerful tool. Finally, Olivia spoke. "Their names are Michael, Benjamin, and Christopher. Michael is the oldest by 4 minutes, then Ben, then Chris. Michael is the serious one, always watching and thinking. Ben is our artist. He can spend hours with his crayons. And Chris is pure energy, always running, always exploring." Ethan absorbed this information like a man dying of thirst. Every detail about his sons felt precious, vital. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "Perfect." "They are." Olivia turned to look at him then, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And they're so much like you, Ethan. Not just in looks, but in the way they think, the way they approach problems. Michael especially. He plans everything, just like you do." "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out before he could. "Stop it!" Heavy with 3 years of lost time. Olivia closed her eyes, pain evident in her expression. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after I left. I spent days trying to figure out how to tell you, drafting emails, picking up the phone only to put it down again. But every time I thought about reaching out, I remembered those last few months together. She paused, gathering her thoughts. You were so focused on your empire, Ethan. Every conversation we had eventually turned to business. Every dinner was interrupted by phone calls. Even when you were physically present, your mind was always somewhere else, planning your next move. I was building something for our future, Ethan protested, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. No, Olivia said gently. You were building something for yourself. I was just there watching from the sidelines. And when I thought about bringing children into that world, she shook her head. I couldn't bear the thought of them feeling as peripheral to your life, as I did. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He remembered countless cancelled dates, ignored messages, the way Olivia's voice had grown increasingly distant in their final months together. He had attributed it to her not understanding his drive, his ambition. Now he wondered if he had been the one who didn't understand what really mattered. When I discovered it was triplets, Olivia continued, I was terrified, but also determined. I wanted them to grow up feeling loved, valued, and seen, not as assets or achievements, but as people. And Jason? Ethan couldn't keep the edge from his voice. How does he fit into this perfect picture? Olivia's expression softened. Jason came into our lives a year ago. When Ben had a severe ear infection, he was their doctor first, then became a friend. He understands that the boys are my priority, and he's never tried to replace their father. He's just been there, helping, caring, making our lives a little easier. Ethan absorbed this information, fighting down the irrational jealousy that threatened to overwhelm him. And now, what happens now that I know about them? That depends, Olivia said carefully, on what you want, and more importantly, on how you want it. They're not a corporate merger, Ethan. You can't just walk in and take control. They're little boys who need stability, patience, and time. He wanted to argue, to assert his rights, to demand immediate access to his sons' lives. It was his natural instinct to take charge, to fix things through sheer force of will. But looking out at the ocean, he remembered Michael's tentative wave at breakfast, the way the boy had studied him with such curiosity. Tell me more about them, he said instead. Everything. Their favorite foods, their allergies, the toys they love, the stories they want to hear over and over. I want to know it all. Olivia's surprise at his response was visible, but she smiled, the first real smile she'd directed at him in 3 years. Well, Michael loves building things. He can spend hours with his blocks creating these incredibly detailed structures. Ben has never met a crayon he didn't like. We have to watch him carefully, or he'll turn every surface into his personal canvas. And Chris, as she spoke, painting a picture of his sons' lives with her words, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The anger and hurt were still there, but alongside them grew something else. Hope. Hope that maybe it wasn't too late to be part of their story, to learn how to be not just a father, but the kind of father they needed. The following morning found Ethan standing uncertainly outside the resort's family pool area, the gift-wrapped packages tucked under his arm. After his long conversation with Olivia on the beach, they had agreed to take small steps. The first would be a proper introduction to the boys during their morning swim. His usual confidence felt oddly misplaced here. He could command boardrooms, navigate hostile takeovers, and close billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But the prospect of meeting his 3-year-old sons, properly this time, made his palms sweat and his heart race. Olivia had given him a crash course in each boy's personality. Michael, the thoughtful observer, Benjamin, the creative spirit, and Christopher, the adventurous soul. Now he just had to figure out how to connect with each of them. He spotted them by the shallow end of the pool. The boys were already in the water, wearing matching swim trunks in different colors, blue for Michael, green for Ben, and red for Chris. Olivia sat at the edge of the pool, her feet dangling in the water as she supervised their play. Jason was nowhere to be seen, which Ethan suspected was a deliberate choice on Olivia's part. Taking a deep breath, he approached the pool. Olivia saw him first and gave him an encouraging nod. Then Michael noticed him, his small face lighting up with recognition. "Look," he called to his brothers, "it's the man from breakfast." Ben and Chris turned to look, their identical faces showing different degrees of curiosity. Ethan felt the full weight of their combined attention, 3 pairs of eyes exactly like his own, studying him with childish intensity. "Boys," Olivia said softly, "there's someone special I'd like you to meet." She gestured for Ethan to come closer. "This is Mr. Reynolds. He's your father." Ethan held his breath, watching their reactions. Michael's eyes widened with understanding, while Ben tilted his head thoughtfully. Chris, true to Olivia's description of him, immediately splashed, his way to the pool's edge. "Like Jason?" Chris asked, looking between his mother and Ethan. "No, sweetheart," Olivia explained gently. "Different from Jason. Mr. Reynolds, Ethan, is your real father. He's the reason you all have those beautiful green eyes and serious faces when you're thinking hard about something." Ethan knelt down at the pool's edge, bringing himself closer to their level. "I brought something for you," he said, revealing the wrapped packages. "If it's okay with your mother." Olivia nodded and Ethan handed each boy their gift. He had made sure the wrapping paper matched their swim trunk colors, a detail that didn't go unnoticed by Michael, who gave him a knowing look that was almost comical on his small face. The boys tore into their packages with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Chris ripped the paper off in seconds, while Michael carefully undid each piece of tape, and Ben managed something in between. Their faces lit up at the sight of the plush sea otters, each with its differently colored bow tie. "Look, Mama!" Ben held up his otter. "He has a green bow like my swimming pants." "Mine has blue," Michael added, already hugging his otter close. Chris was examining his red bow-tied otter with intense concentration. "Do they swim?" he asked suddenly, looking at Ethan with hopeful eyes. "They're not really meant for," Ethan began, but before he could finish, Chris had already dunked his otter into the pool. To everyone's surprise, the plush toy floated. "He swims," Chris announced triumphantly, making his otter dance across the water's surface. Soon all 3 otters were having adventures in the pool, with their young owners crafting increasingly elaborate stories about their aquatic escapades. Ethan found himself drawn into their game, suggesting plot twists and helping to create waves for the otters to navigate. "The otters need a mission," Michael declared seriously, and Ethan recognized his own strategic thinking in the boy's tone. "Maybe they're looking for treasure," Ethan suggested, remembering the book he had also brought. "I have a story about ocean animals that might give us some ideas." The boys crowded around as Ethan opened the book, their wet bodies soaking his casual clothes, but he found he didn't mind at all. As he read about various sea creatures, each boy showed their distinct personality. Michael asked detailed questions about each animal's habits. Ben was fascinated by their colors and patterns, and Chris acted out the movements of each creature they learned about. Olivia watched from her spot at the pool's edge, her expression a mix of emotions Ethan couldn't quite read. But when Michael spontaneously leaned against Ethan's arm to get a better look at a picture of a whale, she smiled, a genuine, warm smile that suggested maybe, just maybe, this could work. Time seemed to flow differently in the pool area, measured not in business meetings and deadlines, but in splashes, laughs, and the increasingly elaborate adventures of 3 well-dressed sea otters. Ethan found himself completely absorbed in their world, forgetting about the dozens of emails, surely piling up in his inbox. It wasn't until Olivia announced it was time for lunch that Ethan realized they had spent nearly 2 hours playing. As the boys reluctantly climbed out of the pool, each clutching their new otters, Chris turned to Ethan with dripping sincerity. "Will you come play again tomorrow?" he asked, his green eyes bright with hope. Ethan looked at Olivia, who gave a small nod. "I'd like that very much," he replied, his throat tight with emotion. As he watched them head off to their room to change for lunch, Ethan realized something profound. For the first time in his adult life, he had spent hours doing something that had no practical value, no strategic importance, and no financial benefit. And yet somehow it felt like the most valuable way he had ever spent his time. Back in his suite, Ethan stood under the hot shower, letting the chlorine wash away from his skin. His phone had been buzzing incessantly. The board was in an Uproar over his continued absence from the Wang Technologies negotiations, but for the first time in his career, their panic didn't seem important. He couldn't stop thinking about the morning's revelations, Michael's careful analysis of every situation, Ben's creative interpretations of their games, Chris's boundless enthusiasm. Each boy was so distinct, yet they moved together with an unconscious harmony that spoke of their deep connection to each other. Stepping out of the shower, he caught his reflection in the steamed mirror. The same eyes that had looked back at him from three small faces stared at him now. He had always seen his features as tools, the stern expression that commanded respect in meetings, the slight smile that put nervous investors at ease. Now he wondered what his sons saw when they looked at him. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Robert Chen, his legal counsel, looking harried. "Ethan, we need to talk," Robert said, stepping into the suite without waiting for an invitation. "The board is threatening to call an emergency meeting. The Wang deal can wait," Ethan interrupted, moving to his laptop. "I need you to focus on something else right now." What could possibly be more important than... Ethan turned the laptop around, showing Robert what he had been researching: California family law, particularly regarding parental rights and custody arrangements. "I need to know my options," Ethan said quietly. "Not to fight Olivia. That's not what this is about. But I need to know how to do this right. How to be legally, officially, irrefutably their father." Robert sank into a chair, his expression shifting from frustration to understanding. "You're serious about this?" "They're my sons, Robert. Everything else, it's just business." "The board won't see it that way. Your whole image, your reputation, it's built on being the man who never lets anything distract him from the next deal." Ethan thought about Chris's question. "Will you come play again tomorrow?" And the pure hope in his son's eyes. Then maybe it's time for a new image. Opening his phone, he pulled up the pictures Olivia had shared with him after their beach conversation. The boys' first steps, their second birthday party, the first time they finger painted, which had apparently required repainting an entire wall of Olivia's apartment. Each image was a moment he had missed, a piece of their lives he could never get back. "I need you to draft two things," he told Robert. "First, the paperwork to legally establish paternity. Second, a restructuring plan for Reynolds Enterprises that will allow me to step back from day-to-day operations." Robert nearly dropped his phone. "Step back? Ethan, you can't be serious. The company will survive. We have capable people. What we need is a structure that doesn't require my presence for every decision." Ethan turned to the window, watching the afternoon sun play on the ocean waves. "I've spent 15 years building an empire, Robert. Now I need to build something else, relationships with my sons." "And Olivia?" Robert asked carefully. "What about her?" Ethan thought about their conversation on the beach, the way she had described each boy's personality with such love and understanding. "She's done an amazing job with them. I'm not looking to disrupt their lives or challenge her custody. I just want to be part of their world, whatever that looks like." His phone buzzed again, another message from the board. Ethan picked it up and, after a moment's consideration, typed out a brief response. "Taking personal leave for family matters. We'll contact soon with restructuring plans." "The Wang family won't wait forever," Robert warned. "This deal is just money," Ethan finished. "I've spent my whole life chasing deals, Robert. This morning I spent 2 hours playing with toy otters in a pool, and it was worth more than any merger I've ever negotiated." He turned back to his laptop, pulling up his calendar. "Clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks. The boys are here for their summer vacation, and I'm not missing a single day of it." Robert stood, straightening his tie with a resigned expression. "I'll start on the paperwork, but Ethan, are you sure about this? It's going to change everything." Ethan thought about Michael's thoughtful questions, Ben's creative storytelling, and Chris's infectious enthusiasm. He thought about Olivia's words on the beach. "They're not a corporate merger, Ethan. You can't just walk in and take control. Everything's already changed, Robert. I'm just trying to catch up." After Robert left, Ethan sat down at his desk, but instead of checking market reports or financial projections, he opened a new document and began to write. At the top, he typed, "Getting to know my sons." Below it, he started listing everything he had learned about them, every detail Olivia had shared, every observation from their morning together. He had always believed in thorough research and detailed planning. Now he was applying those same skills to something far more important than any business deal, becoming the father his sons deserved. The next few days fell into a pattern that was entirely foreign to Ethan's usually regimented life. His mornings began not with market reports and conference calls, but with the sound of children's laughter by the pool or excited chatter over breakfast. He found himself learning a new language, the language of fatherhood, filled with terms like time out, sharing is caring, and indoor voice. This particular morning, he sat cross-legged on the resort's private beach, helping Michael construct an elaborate sandcastle while Ben decorated it with shells and Chris dug a moat around the perimeter. The sea otters, now named Captain Blue, Commander Green, and Admiral Red, supervised from their perch on a beach towel. "It needs a drawbridge," Michael declared, his small face scrunched in concentration. "All proper castles have drawbridges." Ethan looked at the complex structure they had built, complete with multiple towers and carefully carved windows. "You're right. How should we build it?" Before Michael could answer, Chris came bounding over, dripping wet from his moat-digging expedition. "I found a stick. We can use it." Ben, who had been arranging shells in intricate patterns along the castle walls, looked up with interest. "Can we make it move up and down, like in the story?" Ethan studied the materials they had available. Sticks, string from his beach bag, and some flat pieces of driftwood. His mind, trained to solve complex business problems, now focused entirely on the engineering challenge of creating a working drawbridge for a sandcastle. "I think we can," he said, beginning to gather the supplies. "Michael, what if we use these two sticks as support towers? Ben, those flat shells you found could work as the bridge itself. And Chris, we'll need that string you've been collecting." Working together, they created a simple but functional drawbridge mechanism. Ethan showed them how to thread the string through notches in the support sticks, creating a pulley system that allowed the bridge to be raised and lowered. The boys watched in fascination as their father demonstrated the mechanics, each processing the information in their own unique way. "It's like a real castle now," Michael said approvingly, already thinking about what other improvements they could make. "Can we make more things that move?" Ben asked, his artistic mind clearly spinning with possibilities. Chris was already testing the bridge's strength with one of the sea otters. "Admiral Red needs to inspect the defenses." Olivia, who had been watching from her beach chair while catching up on museum correspondence, came over to admire their creation. "That's quite impressive," she said, giving Ethan an appreciative look. "You've managed to combine engineering and playtime." "The boys did most of the work," Ethan replied, feeling an unfamiliar surge of pride that had nothing to do with stock prices or profit margins. "I just helped with the technical details." "Mama, look!" Chris called out, making Admiral Red dance across the drawbridge. "We made it work like magic." "Not magic," Michael corrected seriously. "Engineering, right, Father?" The word hit Ethan like a physical force. It was the first time any of the boys had called him anything other than Mr. Reynolds, and hearing it from Michael's lips, spoken with such matter-of-fact certainty, made his heart skip a beat. Olivia must have noticed his reaction, because she placed a gentle hand on his arm. "They're warming up to you faster than I expected," she said softly. Before Ethan could respond, a familiar voice called from the beach path. "Hey guys, who's ready for lunch?" Jason approached carrying a picnic basket. The boys immediately abandoned their castle-building efforts and ran to greet him, their excitement evident. Ethan felt the familiar twinge of jealousy, but it was different now, less sharp, more resigned. He understood better now why Olivia had chosen Jason to be part of their lives. The man's easy warmth with the children was obvious, as was his. Genuine care for their well-being. To Ethan's surprise, Jason set the basket down and walked over to inspect the sandcastle. "This is incredible," he said, admiring the working drawbridge. "You guys must have worked really hard on this." "Father showed us how to make the bridge move," Ben explained proudly. "It's engineering." Jason's eyes met Ethan's over the castle, and there was understanding in his gaze. "That's fantastic. Maybe we could all have lunch together. I brought plenty." The invitation was clearly meant to include Ethan, and he found himself nodding before he could overthink it. This wasn't about him or Jason. It was about the boys, about making their world stable and secure, even as it expanded to include their biological father. As they spread out the picnic lunch on beach blankets, Ethan watched his sons interact with both Jason and Olivia. There was an easy familiarity there, a comfortable routine that spoke of countless shared meals and experiences. Instead of feeling threatened by it, Ethan found himself grateful. His sons had been loved, cared for, protected. Now he had the chance to add to that love, not replace or compete with it. Michael settled next to Ethan with his sandwich, automatically copying his father's posture. Ben spread his napkin out like a canvas, arranging his fruit in patterns before eating it. Chris bounced between all the adults, chattering about the castle and their morning adventures. His phone lit up with an incoming video call from Sarah Bennett, the head of his board of directors. Ethan had been avoiding her calls for days, but he knew he couldn't put this off any longer. With a deep breath, he accepted the call. "Ethan," Sarah's voice was sharp with concern, "the Wang family is demanding answers. They're threatening to take their business to Wilson Industries if we don't move forward immediately. We need you back in New York." He looked out at the ocean, thinking about the sandcastle they had built, about Michael calling him father for the first time. "I can't leave right now, Sarah. Can't leave, Ethan. This is a multi-billion-dollar deal we're talking about. Whatever's going on out there, surely it can wait a few days." "No," Ethan said firmly. "It can't. I've already lost 3 years with my sons. I'm not losing another day." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was softer. "Sons, Ethan, what's going on?" He explained the situation briefly, watching Sarah's expression shift from confusion to understanding. "I see," she said finally, "but surely we can find a way to handle both. You've never let personal matters interfere with business before." "That's exactly the problem," Ethan replied. "I've always put business first. Look where it got me, building an empire while my children grew up not knowing who I was." "The board won't accept this, Ethan. They'll call for a vote of no confidence. Everything you've built." "We'll have to adapt," he interrupted. "Robert is drawing up restructuring plans. I'm not abandoning the company, Sarah. I'm just reprioritizing." The call ended with no real resolution, but Ethan felt strangely peaceful about it. He turned back to his laptop, where he had been working on something far more important than quarterly projections, a letter to each of his sons, to be given to them when they were older, explaining why he hadn't been there for their early years, and promising to be there for all the years to come. A knock at his door interrupted his writing. To his surprise, it was Jason. "Can we talk?" the younger man asked, his expression serious, but not unfriendly. Ethan invited him in, curious about what would prompt this late-night visit. Jason declined the offered drink, getting straight to the point. "Olivia told me about your plans to restructure your company, to make more time for the boys," he said. "I wanted to make sure you understand what you're getting into." "Meaning?" "Meaning. Those 3 boys aren't a part-time commitment. They need consistency, stability. They need to know that if you're going to be in their lives, you're going to stay there." Ethan felt a flash of anger at the implied criticism, but forced himself to consider Jason's words. "Is that why you're here? To warn me off?" Jason shook his head. "Actually, I'm here to help if you want it. I've been part of their lives for over a year now. I know their routines, their personalities, what works with each of them and what doesn't. I'm not trying to compete with you, Ethan. They're your sons. But I care about them, and I want what's best for them." The offer caught Ethan off guard. He studied Jason's face, looking for any sign of ulterior motives, but found only genuine concern for the boys' welfare. "Why?" Ethan asked finally. "Why? Would you want to help me?" "Because those boys light up when they talk about building sandcastles with their father. Because Michael has started carrying himself differently, trying to mirror your posture. Because Ben showed me 6 different drawings today, and every one of them included you. Because Chris asked if you could come to his next doctor's appointment, to see where Dr. Jason works." He paused, letting that sink in. "They're already getting attached, Ethan. So if you're going to do this, you need to do it right." Ethan thought about the restructuring plans, about Sarah's warnings and the board's potential reactions. Then he thought about the weight of Michael in his lap as they read stories, about Ben's concentrated face as he explained his artwork, about Chris's boundless energy and endless questions. "I want to do this right," he said finally. "I need to do this right. Any advice you can offer, I'm listening." Jason smiled, genuinely this time. "Well, for starters, Michael loves dinosaurs but is scared of the big ones. Ben will only eat red apples, not green ones, and he needs his food separated on the plate so nothing touches, and Chris needs to be reminded about indoor voice at least 20 times a day." As Jason shared more details about the boys' lives, Ethan took mental notes, adding to his growing understanding of his sons. This wasn't a business negotiation or a corporate merger. It was something far more complex and infinitely more important, learning to be a father to 3 remarkable little boys who somehow, despite his absence, had space in their hearts for him. The future was uncertain, the board's reaction, the logistics of balancing his business responsibilities with fatherhood, the complex dynamics of co-parenting with Olivia, while respecting Jason's role in the boys' lives. But for the first time in his life, Ethan was facing that uncertainty not with strategic plans and risk assessments, but with hope and determination to make it work, whatever it took. A week had passed since Ethan's first encounter with his sons, and the changes in his life were profound. His normally pristine suite now contained a collection of children's books, scattered toys, and 3 very well-loved sea otters who spent their nights there when the boys insisted their aquatic friends needed sleepover time with father. This morning, he was attempting something entirely new, getting the boys ready for breakfast by himself. Olivia had an important video call with her museum board, and Jason had been called back to San Francisco for an emergency at his practice. Ethan had volunteered to handle the morning routine, armed with Jason's detailed notes and Olivia's careful instructions. "Chris, please put your shoes on," Ethan said for what felt like the 100th time, while simultaneously helping Ben find his favorite blue shirt and making sure Michael hadn't brought his entire collection of dinosaur books to breakfast. "But I can't find Admiral." "Red!" Chris protested, crawling under the bed in his pajamas. "Admiral Red is having a spa day, remember?" Ethan reminded him, recalling Olivia's clever excuse to wash the well-loved plush toys. "He'll be back this afternoon, fresh and clean." "Like after a bath?" Chris asked, emerging from under the bed covered in dust bunnies. "Exactly like that," Ethan agreed, adding "Dust Chris" off to his mental checklist. "Now shoes." "Father," Michael called from his position by the window, "is it true that T-Rex couldn't swim? Because in my book it shows them near water, but if they had such small arms..." "The blue shirt isn't blue enough," Ben interrupted, holding up 2 nearly identical blue shirts with a concerned expression. "It needs to be ocean blue, not sky blue." Ethan took a deep breath, remembering Jason's advice about staying calm during morning chaos. "Michael, let's discuss dinosaur swimming abilities over breakfast. Ben, both shirts are wonderful, but this one matches your brother's better. Chris, if you put your shoes on in the next minute, you can tell everyone at breakfast about Admiral Red's spa adventure." To his surprise, this combination of responses actually worked. Within 5 minutes, all 3 boys were dressed, reasonably clean, and ready for breakfast. It wasn't perfect. Chris's shoes were on the wrong feet, Ben's shirt was slightly wrinkled, and Michael was still clutching his favorite dinosaur book. But it was progress. As they walked to the restaurant, Ethan found himself automatically adjusting his pace to match the boys' shorter legs, something that would have irritated him just a week ago. Now it felt natural, as did reaching down to hold Chris's hand when he got distracted by a passing butterfly, or listening to Ben's detailed explanation of why ocean blue was superior to sky blue. The hostess smiled as they approached, already familiar with the family's routine. "Your usual table is ready, Mr. Reynolds. Should I bring the special pancakes for the young gentleman?" "Yes, please," Ethan replied, then added, remembering Olivia's instructions, "But could we have Ben's on a separate plate and extra napkins?" "Course, sir." As they settled into their seats, Ethan noticed Michael arranging his silverware with precise attention to detail, mirroring the way Ethan had done it the day before. Ben immediately began creating art with his placemat and crayons, while Chris regaled anyone within earshot about Admiral Red's spa adventure, which had grown to include underwater massages and seaweed wraps. "Father," Michael said suddenly, looking up from his dinosaur book, "will you still be here when Admiral Red comes back from the spa?" The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Ethan set down his coffee cup, giving his son his full attention. "Yes, I will. In fact, I'd like to be here for many more things, not just Admiral Red's return." "But you have a big important job," Chris chimed in, momentarily distracted from his story. "Like Dr. Jason has to help sick people." "That's true," Ethan acknowledged, choosing his words carefully. "But being your father is also a very important job. One I should have been doing all along." "Are you good at it?" Ben asked, looking up from his artwork. "Mama says practice makes perfect." The innocent question hit Ethan hard. "I'm learning," he said honestly. "Sometimes I might make mistakes, but I promise I'll keep practicing until I get better." "Like when I was learning to swim," Chris offered. "I was scared at first, but then Dr. Jason taught me to float and now I can do it." "Exactly like that," Ethan agreed, amazed at how his son's simple analogy perfectly captured what he was feeling. "Sometimes we need help learning new things, even grown-ups." Michael nodded seriously. "That's why you ask Mama and Dr. Jason questions about us. You're studying to be a better father." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing." "I think you're doing good," Ben said, pushing his completed placemat artwork toward Ethan. "I drew us all together. See? That's you being our father." The drawing showed 6 figures, 3 small ones in the middle, surrounded by what were clearly meant to be Olivia, Jason, and Ethan. They were all holding hands, forming a circle around the boys. It was childish and simple, yet somehow captured perfectly what they were all trying to build together. "Can we put it on your refrigerator?" Ben asked hopefully. "Dr. Jason has lots of my pictures on his. I don't have a refrigerator here at the resort," Ethan admitted, "but I have something better." He carefully folded the drawing and placed it in his wallet, right behind his business cards. "Now I can keep it with me all the time." The boys beamed at this solution, and Ethan felt something shift inside him. A week ago, he would have considered a child's crayon drawing in his expensive wallet to be messy and unprofessional. Now it felt like the most valuable thing he carried. Their pancakes arrived, Mickey Mouse shapes for the boys with Ben's carefully separated on its own plate, and Ethan found himself fully engaged in the moment, helping Chris cut his food into manageable bites while discussing dinosaur diets with Michael and admiring Ben's precise arrangement of syrup and fruit. He had meetings scheduled for later, video calls that couldn't be postponed any longer. But for now, for this moment, he was exactly where he needed to be, learning the intricate, challenging, wonderful job of being a father. That afternoon, while the boys were napping, Ethan finally conducted his video conference with the board of directors. He sat in his suite, dressed in his usual impeccable business attire, but with Ben's crayon drawing spread out on the desk beside him, a reminder of what truly mattered. "The restructuring plan is sound," he explained to the assembled faces on his screen. "Jennifer Park has been groomed for the COO position for years. She's more than capable of handling day-to-day operations. I'll remain as CEO and handle major strategic decisions, but I need flexibility in my schedule." "This is unprecedented," Sarah Bennett argued. "The market won't understand. Our stock could take a hit." "Then we'll weather it," Ethan replied, firmly. "We've survived worse. The Wang deal has already gone to Wilson Industries," Sarah interrupted. "They announced it this morning." Ethan absorbed this news, waiting for the familiar surge of competitive anger, the need to retaliate. Instead, he felt something different, relief. "Then that's settled. We can focus on implementing these changes without that distraction." "Ethan," another board member spoke up, "be reasonable. You're talking about dramatically altering your role for children you just met. Children who have managed perfectly well without you for 3 years. Ethan picked up Ben's drawing, holding it where his camera would capture it. "Do you see this? My son drew this morning. He drew all of us, me, his mother, even her boyfriend, all working together to take care of him and his brothers." A 3-year-old understands something that seems to be eluding this board. Sometimes success isn't about winning every deal or maximizing every profit. Sometimes it's about building something meaningful, even if it's messy and complicated. The silence that followed was heavy with surprise. Ethan Reynolds, known for his ruthless business acumen and unwavering focus on the bottom line, was holding up a child's crayon drawing in a board meeting. "I'm not abandoning the company," he continued, his voice firm. "I'm evolving its leadership structure to meet new priorities. The question isn't whether this is happening, it's whether you're willing to work with me to make it successful." One by one, the board members began to nod. Even Sarah's expression softened slightly. "We'll need a detailed transition plan," she said finally, "and a strong PR strategy to manage market perception." "You'll have them both by the end of the week," Ethan promised. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a previous engagement." He ended the call and quickly changed into casual clothes. The boys would be waking up soon, and he had promised to take them to the resort's mini golf course, an activity that Jason had suggested would help with their motor skills and patience. He headed down to meet them. He ran into Olivia in the hallway. She was just coming from the boys' room, looking tired but happy. "They're still sleeping," she said. "The morning wore them out. I heard about the Wang deal. I'm sorry." Ethan shook his head. "Don't be. A week ago, losing that deal would have felt like a personal failure. Now it feels like making room for something more important." Olivia studied his face. "You've changed," she said softly. "The Ethan I knew would never have let a deal like that go without a fight." "The Ethan you knew didn't know what he was missing," he replied. "I can't get back the 3 years I lost with them, Olivia, but I can make sure I don't miss any more time." "And your empire? Your reputation as the man who never backs down?" "We'll have to adjust to the fact that I'm a father now. Actually, I've always been a father. I just didn't know it. Now that I do, everything else has to work around that, not the other way around." Olivia's expression softened. "You know it. Won't be easy, right? They're going to test you, push boundaries, have bad days. It's not all sandcastles and pancake breakfasts." "I know," Ethan nodded. "Jason's been very thorough in his warnings about the challenges ahead. But I'm ready for it, all of it." A small voice called from down the hall. "Father, is it time for golf?" They turned to see Michael standing there, hair mussed from his nap, clutching his ever-present dinosaur book. Behind him, Ben and Chris were emerging from their room, still yawning but excited for their promised adventure. "Yes, it is," Ethan replied, feeling his heart lift at the sight of them. "Should we see if Dr. Jason's advice about putting techniques works? Can Admiral Red come too?" Chris asked hopefully. "He's back from the spa." Ethan caught Olivia's amused look. "Of course he can. The whole fleet can come. Captain Blue and Commander Green too." As they headed toward the golf course, 3 sleepy but excited boys and their freshly cleaned sea otters in tow, Ethan felt a deep sense of rightness. The Wang deal was gone, his role at the company was changing, and nothing about the future was certain. But watching his sons clutch their putters with determination, seeing their faces light up when they hit the ball just right, hearing their laughter echo across the course, he knew he had made the right choice. Some things couldn't be measured in stock prices or profit margins. Some things were simply priceless. The resort's 2-week vacation period was drawing to a close, bringing with it a new set of challenges and decisions. Ethan sat in one of the oceanfront cabanas, watching his sons build an elaborate sand city, complete with roads, parks, and what Chris insisted was a space station for sea otters. The past 10 days had transformed him in ways he never expected, but now reality was knocking at the door. Olivia approached, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She handed one to Ethan and settled into the adjacent chair. "We need to talk about what happens next," she said quietly, careful not to let the boys overhear. "I've been thinking about that," Ethan replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "I've already started looking at properties in San Francisco." Olivia's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You're moving to San Francisco?" "The company has offices there. Jennifer can handle New York operations, and I can manage strategic oversight from the West Coast. He watched as Michael carefully measured out roads in the Sand City, using a piece of driftwood as a ruler. I want to be part of their lives, Olivia. Really part of it, not just a voice on the phone or a weekend visitor. And your board is okay with this? They're adjusting to the idea. The PR team is already spinning it as a strategic expansion of our West Coast presence. He smiled slightly. Amazing how leaving New York becomes a brilliant business move when presented properly. A squeal of laughter interrupted them as Chris demonstrated his latest invention, a water slide for the sea otters made from curved palm fronds. Ben was adding decorative shells to the construction, while Michael supervised the structural integrity of the whole operation. They're going to miss this place, Olivia said softly. It's been magical in a way, like a bubble where we could all figure out how to be a family. It doesn't have to end, Ethan replied. The magic, I mean. We just have to work a little harder to create it in the real world. Speaking of the real world, Olivia hesitated. Jason's practice is in San Francisco. He's been really good with them, Ethan. I don't want them to lose that stability. I know. Ethan watched as Jason, who had just returned from his emergency at the hospital, joined the boys in their Sand City construction. He was helping Ben create a garden using small pieces of seaweed and tiny shells. I've actually been talking with him about it. He's been incredibly helpful in helping me understand the boys. I don't want to disrupt that relationship. Olivia studied his face. The Ethan I knew 3 years ago would have seen Jason as competition. The Ethan you knew 3 years ago was an idiot, he replied simply. These past days have taught me something important. Being a father isn't about being the only man in their lives. It's about making sure they have all the love and support they can get. Down by the water, Chris was excitedly showing Jason the sea otter water slide, while Michael explained the city's infrastructure with all the seriousness of an urban planner. Ben had moved on to creating what appeared to be a public art installation using colorful pieces of beach glass. I've already started looking into schools in San Francisco, Ethan continued. There's an excellent progressive elementary school near the neighborhood where I'm looking at houses. They have a strong arts program that Ben would love, and their science curriculum would fascinate Michael. And their physical education program? Olivia asked with a knowing smile, watching Chris run circles around his brothers. Multiple sports options and a swimming pool, Ethan confirmed. Jason mentioned it's where many of his patients go. He said the school's approach to active children is excellent. Olivia was quiet for a moment, watching the scene before them. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I have 3 years of fatherhood to catch up on, Ethan replied. I can't afford to make mistakes now. I've been learning everything I can about their personalities, their needs, their interests. Did you know I actually read 3 different books about dinosaurs last night, just so I could keep up with Michael's questions? And what about your questions? Olivia asked gently. About why I didn't tell you about them. Ethan took a long breath. I won't pretend it doesn't hurt, knowing I missed so much. Their first words, first steps, first everything. But I understand why you made that choice. The man I was then, he wouldn't have been ready for this. He wouldn't have known how to love them the way they deserve to be loved. And now I can't imagine my life without them in it. Every morning when I wake up, my first thought is about what adventures we might have that day. Every business decision I make now starts with how it will impact my time with them. They've completely reorganized my priorities, and I couldn't be happier about it. A small figure came running up to them, covered in sand and beaming with excitement. Father, Uncle Jason says we can make the water slide bigger if we use the big shells as support beams. Come help. Ethan stood immediately, his coffee forgotten. Engineering challenge, I'm on my way. As he followed Chris back to the Sand City, he heard Olivia's quiet laughter behind him. The mighty Ethan Reynolds, terror of Wall Street, was about to spend the next hour figuring out how to build a water slide for stuffed sea otters. And he wouldn't have it any other way. The afternoon sun painted everything in warm golden light as the extended family worked together on their beach creation. Jason's medical knowledge combined with Ethan's engineering background led to a surprisingly stable waterslide structure. Olivia's artistic eye helped Ben perfect his shell gardens, while Michael documented everything in his notebook for future reference. Chris tested each new addition with enthusiasm, making sure it met Admiral Red's exacting standards. On their final evening after the boys were asleep, Ethan sat with Olivia and Jason on his suite's balcony. The sound of waves provided a peaceful backdrop to their conversation as they discussed the practicalities of their unusual situation. "I've found a house," Ethan said, pulling up photos on his tablet. "It's about 15 minutes from your apartment, Olivia, and 10 minutes from your practice, Jason. 5 bedrooms, a large backyard with room for play equipment, and a separate guest house that could be converted into a home office." Olivia studied the photos with interest. "That's in Pacific Heights, isn't it? Near the park where the boys love to feed the ducks." "Exactly," I thought. "Well, I hoped we could establish some sort of routine. Regular dinners together, maybe? I know it might be awkward at first, but I want the boys to feel like we're all on the same team." Jason leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Actually, that might work well with my schedule. I usually have Wednesday evenings free, and the boys already associate that day with special dinner since it's when we usually try new recipes together." "Wednesday family dinners," Olivia mused. "It could work. And maybe weekend activities we can all participate in. The boys have so much energy, it's good to have multiple adults to help manage their adventures." Ethan nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He had been worried about how they would translate the easy cooperation they had developed at the resort into real-world logistics. "There's something else," he said, pulling out 3 more folders from his briefcase. "I've been working with my lawyers to set up trust funds for the boys, not just for college, but for anything they might need or want to pursue. I want to be clear. This isn't about buying their affection or making up for lost time. It's about ensuring they have every opportunity available to them." Olivia started to protest, but Ethan held up his hand. "Please let me finish. The trusts are structured so that both you and Jason have input into how the funds are used. You've been making all these decisions for 3 years. I don't want to disrupt that. I just want to add my support to the foundation you've already built." Jason studied Ethan with newfound respect. "You really have changed, haven't you? The way Olivia described you before. Well, let's just say this level of consideration wasn't what I expected." "The man Olivia knew was focused on building an empire," Ethan admitted. "I'm more interested in building a family now. Speaking of which," he pulled out one final document. "Jason, I know you and Olivia have been discussing marriage." Both Olivia and Jason stiffened slightly, but Ethan continued. "I think it's wonderful. The boys adore you, and it's obvious how much you care for them. I've had my lawyers draw up papers that would allow you to legally adopt them after the wedding while preserving my parental rights. That way, they'll have the security of knowing both their fathers are legally recognized." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll both consider it. The boys deserve to have their family relationships officially acknowledged, all of them." Jason stood and walked to the balcony railing, clearly processing this unexpected offer. After a moment, he turned back. "You know, when Olivia first told me about you showing up here, I was worried. I thought you might try to take them away, or at least try to push me out of their lives." "A few years ago, I might have," Ethan acknowledged. "But these past 2 weeks have taught me something important. Love isn't a finite resource. The boys don't have to choose between us. They can have both their fathers, plus their mother, and anyone else who wants to be part of their support system. The more people who love them, the better." Olivia reached out and squeezed his hand. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the time Michael explained to me why Stegosaurus plates helped regulate body temperature. Nothing makes you reevaluate your priorities like a 3-year-old teaching you dinosaur biology." They all laughed, the sound carrying out over the darkened beach where, just hours ago, they had all worked together to build one final sandcastle. This one had featured 3 distinct architectural styles: Michael's practical infrastructure, Ben's artistic flourishes, and Chris's imaginative additions like a rainbow bridge for the sea otters. "So," Jason said finally, "Wednesday family." "Dinners?" "Wednesday family dinners," Olivia confirmed. "And maybe Sunday brunches too. The boys love those chocolate chip pancakes you make, Jason." "I'll learn to make them," Ethan offered, "along with everything else I need to learn. I'm not expecting this to be easy or perfect, but I'm committed to making it work." As they continued planning, their voices mixing with the sound of waves and distant music from the resort, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. The empire builder was still there, but he had found a better purpose for his strategic thinking and problem-solving skills, creating a stable, loving environment for 3 remarkable little boys who had unexpectedly changed his entire world. Tomorrow they would leave this place, this magical bubble where their unusual family had first taken shape. But they weren't ending something. They were beginning something even more important, building a real life together with all its challenges and complications and unexpected joys. And somewhere in their future lay countless more sandcastles, family dinners and adventures with 3 well-loved sea otters who had witnessed the birth of something truly special, a family that didn't fit any traditional mold but was perfect in its own unique way. The morning of departure arrived with a mix of excitement and nostalgia. Ethan stood in his suite, supervising as hotel staff packed up not just his usual business attire, but also a collection of children's books, toys, and 3 very special sea otters that had somehow migrated to his room over the past 2 weeks. "Eh?" Knock at the door revealed Michael still in his pajamas, clutching his dinosaur book. "Father, can I help pack the otters? I want to make sure they're comfortable for the flight." Ethan welcomed him in, noting how naturally Michael now used the word father, a small miracle that still made his heart skip a beat every time. "Of course, they're your area of expertise after all." Michael approached the task with his characteristic seriousness, carefully arranging Captain Blue, Commander Green, and Admiral Red in their own special bag that Olivia had provided. "They need to stay together," he explained. "They get scared if they're separated like we do." The simple observation caught Ethan off guard. "Do you get scared of being separated from your brothers?" Michael nodded, his small face thoughtful. "Sometimes, but Mama says it's okay to be scared as long as you're brave too. Are you going to be scared when we go home?" Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed, patting the space next to him. Michael climbed up, still holding the otter bag. "Why would I be scared?" "Because everything will be different," Michael said with the startling insight children sometimes display. "Here, we're all together all the time, but at home, we have school, and you have work, and Dr. Jason has his patients." Ethan put his arm around his son's shoulders. "You're right. Things will be different. But different doesn't always mean worse. Remember how we learned to make the drawbridge for the sandcastle? At first it seemed impossible, but then we figured it out together. By using engineering," Michael nodded seriously. "Exactly. Well, this is like that. We'll figure out how to build something new together. And yes, sometimes I might be a little scared too, but like your mama says, we can be brave at the same time." A commotion at the door interrupted them as Chris burst in, followed more sedately by Ben and Olivia. "Father, Dr. Jason says we can ride in a real airplane," Chris announced, bouncing with excitement. "Not just any airplane," Ethan smiled. "A special one where we can all sit together and the otters can have their own seats if they want." Ben approached the bag Michael was holding. "Did you pack them snacks? Commander Green gets hungry on long trips." "How do you know?" Chris asked, momentarily pausing in his bouncing. "Because he's green like vegetables, so he must get hungry more," Ben explained with impeccable 3-year-old logic. Olivia caught Ethan's eye over the boys' heads, sharing an amused look at their son's imagination. She was dressed casually for travel, but Ethan noticed she was wearing the silver bracelet he had seen Jason give her a few days ago. A simple but elegant engagement ring would soon join it, according to their discussions last night. "Is everything ready?" Jason appeared in the doorway carrying several bags. "The car service is waiting downstairs." The boys immediately switched their attention to this new logistical challenge. "Can the otters ride in the car with us?" Chris asked. "Of course," Jason replied smoothly. "They can help navigate." As they made their way down to the lobby, Ethan found himself taking mental snapshots of everything, the way the morning light played on the marble floors where he had first seen his sons, the pool where they had spent countless hours playing, the beach visible through the windows where they had built their many sandcastles. The hotel staff lined up to bid them farewell, many having become fond of the energetic triplets over the past 2 weeks. The hostess from the restaurant handed each boy a specially wrapped cookie for the journey, while the gift shop clerk who had sold Ethan the otters waved goodbye. Outside, 3 black SUVs waited to transport them to the private airfield. Ethan had arranged for extra vehicles to accommodate their enlarged family group comfortably. As the bags were being loaded, he noticed Michael hanging back, looking at the resort entrance. "Everything okay, buddy?" Ethan asked, kneeling down beside him. "I'm making a memory," Michael explained. "Like taking a picture with your mind. Mama says that's important for special places." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. "It is important. This place will always be special for us, won't it?" Michael nodded. "This is where you became our father. I mean, you were always our father, but this is where you learned how to be one." Out of the mouths of babes, Ethan thought, amazed once again by his son's perception. "You're right. And you know what? You and your brothers taught me how. Like how you taught us about engineering. Exactly like that. Now, should we go make sure Admiral Red is properly secured in his seat? I hear he's very particular about safety protocols." Michael giggled, a rare and precious sound, and took Ethan's hand as they walked to the car. The other boys were already settled in their car seats, with Olivia and Jason ensuring everyone was properly buckled. As Ethan helped Michael into his seat, making sure both he and Admiral Red were secure, he realized something profound. 2 weeks ago, he had walked into this resort as a man who thought he had everything figured out. He was leaving as someone entirely different. A father, a co-parent, and a man who had learned that the most valuable things in life couldn't be measured in dollars or market shares. The resort grew smaller in the rearview mirror as their convoy pulled away, but its importance in their family story would never diminish. This was where everything had changed, where a chance encounter had evolved into something beautiful and complex and real. The private jet gleamed in the morning sun as they approached across the tarmac. Ethan had made countless trips on this aircraft, but never one that felt so important. The boys were awestruck by the plane, their excitement barely contained as they climbed the stairs, each clutching their beloved sea otters. Inside, the usually austere business interior had been transformed. The crew had arranged 3 special seats with booster chairs, complete with small tables for coloring and snacks. A basket of carefully selected toys and books waited at each station, and the otters even had their own mini seat belts, much to the boys' delight. "This is amazing," Olivia said softly as she helped Ben settle into his seat. "You thought of everything." "I had help," Ethan admitted, nodding toward Jason, who had provided detailed advice about traveling with energetic 3-year-olds. "Though I'm not sure anything can fully prepare us for 3 hours in an enclosed space with our incredibly active sons." The word hour rolled off his tongue naturally now, including not just Olivia, but Jason as well. It was remarkable how quickly their unusual family dynamic had begun to feel normal. As the plane took off, Ethan watched his son's reactions. Michael observed everything with scientific curiosity, asking detailed questions about how planes fly. Ben was captivated by the view, already pulling out his crayons to capture the clouds. Chris surprisingly fell asleep almost immediately, Admiral Red tucked securely under his arm. Just like his first car ride, Jason commented with a knowing smile. Motion puts him right to sleep. The flight passed in a blur of activities. Snack time, story time, and what became known as cloud shape investigation time at Michael's insistence. Ethan found himself moving easily between roles, helping Ben with his art supplies, discussing cloud formation with Michael, and gently tucking Chris's blanket around him when he dozed off again after a burst of energy. Halfway through the flight, Olivia moved to sit beside Ethan, while Jason entertained the awake boys with a puppet show featuring the sea otters. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about how to explain all this to them when they're older. How to tell them the story of their family." Ethan watched as Jason made Commander Green do a silly dance, earning delighted giggles from Michael and Ben. "What have you come up with?" "I thought we could start with the resort. Tell them about how sometimes the best families are the ones that come together in unexpected ways. How love isn't about who was there first, but about who chooses to stay. And about how sometimes people need time to become who they're meant to be," Ethan added, thinking about his own transformation, even if that means taking the long way around. Olivia smiled, watching their sons play. "They won't remember much of this time when they're older. They're too young." "Then we'll tell them the story," Ethan said, "about the summer when their father learned what really mattered. About the sea otters who helped bridge the gap between strangers and family. About how their Uncle Jason helped teach their father how to be a dad." "Uncle Jason?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Well, once you're married, he'll technically be their stepfather, but I thought, given everything, Uncle Jason might be a good way to acknowledge both his existing role and the new one. What do you think?" Olivia's eyes welled with tears. "I think you really have become a different man, Ethan Reynolds." "Not different," he corrected gently. "Just finally the man I was supposed to be all along. It just took 3 amazing little boys to show me the way." The plane began its descent into San Francisco, the familiar skyline appearing through the windows. The boys pressed their faces to the glass, pointing out landmarks they recognized. Their excitement was tinged with questions about what would happen next, questions that Ethan was ready to answer. "Will we see you tomorrow, Father?" Michael asked as they prepared for landing. "Yes," Ethan assured him. "I'll come help you. Get settled in your room at Mama's house, and then tomorrow I'll show you my new house. Remember, the one near the park with the ducks." "The one with space for a science lab?" Michael asked hopefully, referring to Ethan's promise to set up an exploration area in the new house. "And an art studio?" Ben chimed in. "And a super big playground," Chris added, awake again and bouncing with renewed energy. "All of that and more," Ethan promised. "But most importantly, space for all of us to be together." As the plane touched down, Ethan felt a profound sense of rightness. The past 2 weeks had changed everything. His priorities, his understanding of success, his very definition of family. The path ahead wouldn't be simple. There would be challenges, adjustments, and moments of uncertainty. But looking at his sons, their faces bright with excitement for the future, he knew that every complex negotiation, every careful compromise, every thoughtful discussion with Olivia and Jason had been worth it. They were building something unique and beautiful, a family that defied conventional definitions, but was bound together by love, understanding, and the simple wisdom of 3 little boys who saw no contradiction in having both a father and an Uncle Jason in their lives. The plane came to a stop, and as they prepared to disembark, Ethan noticed something that made him smile. Michael was carefully explaining to his brothers how the plane's wheels worked, using the exact words Ethan had used earlier. Ben was adding artistic details to the technical explanation, while Chris acted out the movement of the landing gear with Admiral Red. Ethan stood in his home office, now decorated with a collection of Ben's artwork, Michael's scientific observations, and photographs of Chris's various adventures. The corporate reports and market analyses still existed, but they shared space with dinosaur books, craft supplies, and a growing collection of family photos. A familiar voice called from downstairs. "Father, we're here for Wednesday dinner." Ethan smiled, closing his laptop without hesitation. Wednesday family dinners had become sacred, a tradition that anchored their unconventional family structure. He descended the stairs to find his sons already rushing through their usual arrival routine, Michael heading to the mini-science lab in the corner of the family room, Ben making a beeline for his art supplies, and Chris bouncing between both areas with boundless energy. Olivia and Jason followed more sedately, Jason carrying a covered dish that added to the evening's menu. The engagement ring on Olivia's finger caught the light. The wedding was planned for spring, with the boys set to be ring bearers. "How was the museum?" Ethan asked Olivia, taking the dish from Jason. "Incredible. The new exhibit is coming. Together beautifully." Olivia had recently been promoted to executive director of the museum, her career flourishing alongside their new family arrangement. "And the pediatric practice?" he asked Jason, who was already helping Chris untangle himself from an elaborate game he'd invented. "Growing, though not as fast as these three," Jason laughed, finally freeing Chris from his self-imposed predicament. The kitchen island had become their gathering spot, everyone participating in dinner preparation according to their abilities. Michael measured ingredients with scientific precision, Ben arranged everything with artistic flair, and Chris provided entertainment and enthusiasm. As they worked together, Ethan reflected on how far they'd come. The transition hadn't been perfect. There had been challenging days, moments of confusion and the occasional tantrum, not all from the 3-year-olds, but they had faced each challenge together, their unusual family unit growing stronger. With each obstacle overcome, the house had evolved to accommodate everyone's needs. The guest house was now a co-parenting command center where they could all work together on schedules, activities, and the daily logistics of raising triplets. The backyard had become a wonderland of educational play equipment with areas dedicated to each boy's interests while encouraging them to share and explore together. "Father," Michael called from his position at the counter, "did you know that velociraptors hunted in packs, like families?" "Like our family?" Chris asked, momentarily pausing in his dinner dance routine. "Exactly like our family," Jason confirmed, sharing a knowing look with Ethan. "Different members working together to take care of each other." Ben looked up from where he was arranging carrots into a pattern. "Are we a different kind of family?" Ethan knelt down to his son's level. "We're exactly the kind of family we're supposed to be. Sometimes the best families are the ones that come together in their own special way." "Like how the sea otters found us at the beach," Chris suggested, bringing Admiral Red, Captain Blue, and Commander Green to join the conversation. "Just like that," Olivia smiled, wrapping an arm around Jason while reaching out to squeeze Ethan's hand. "Sometimes the best things in life happen when we least expect them." The evening progressed with their usual comfortable chaos. Dinner served with love and laughter, stories shared about their respective days, and plans made for upcoming adventures. The boys demonstrated their latest discoveries and creations, their unique personalities shining through every interaction. As Ethan watched his sons play after dinner, their imaginative games incorporating elements from all the adults in their lives. Michael's scientific approach, Ben's artistic vision, Chris's boundless energy, Olivia's nurturing wisdom, and Jason's playful patience, he realized that their family had become something extraordinary. They hadn't just built a new kind of family, they had created a template for what love could look like when people put children's needs first and their own egos aside. Every Wednesday dinner, every shared weekend activity, every cooperative decision about the boys' upbringing was a testament to what was possible when adults chose to work together instead of against each other. The sun set over San Francisco, painting the sky in colors that Ben would surely want to capture in his next masterpiece. The boys were engaged in their latest game, something involving sea otters exploring dinosaur museums in space, while the adults cleaned up dinner and discussed upcoming plans. Looking at them all together, Ethan remembered that moment in the resort lobby 6 months ago, when his world had been turned upside down by the sight of 3 little boys who shared his eyes. He couldn't have imagined then how complete his life would feel now, how natural it would become to share parenting with not just his children's mother, but also the man who had helped raise them. The empire builder had become something far more important. A father who understood that true success wasn't measured in dollars or deals, but in the laughter of his children, in the strength of their unusual family bonds, and in the love that had room to grow in every direction. As the evening wound down and the boys prepared to head home with Olivia and Jason, Ethan knelt to receive his customary triple hug goodbye. Each boy had their own style, Michael's careful embrace, Ben's artistic flourish, and Chris's enthusiastic squeeze. But together they created a perfect moment of connection. "See you tomorrow, Father," they called as they left, their voices harmonizing in the way that only triplets could manage. "Tomorrow," Ethan promised, watching them go with Olivia and Jason, knowing that this wasn't an ending but a continuation of their extraordinary journey together. The house grew quiet, but it wasn't the empty silence he had known in his previous life. It was a peaceful quiet, filled with the echoes of family love and the promise of more adventures to come. On his desk upstairs, next to the corporate reports and business plans, lay a child's drawing. 6 figures holding hands around 3 smiling boys with 3 sea otters floating above them like guardian angels. It was everything he had never known he wanted, and everything his sons had helped him become brave enough to embrace.